later, and also if you want to share it with others, you're welcome to do that. And then lastly, we are planning to hold Q&A to the end. So if you don't mind muting your device, and then you can by all means put questions in the comment box if you want to make sure you get your questions out there. But if you don't mind, please hold the questions to the end, and we'll do Q&A at the end of this session, and we'll make sure we address all the questions before we wrap. So with that, I'm very honored to introduce Jason Roy. Jason is going to be leading our event today, and I'm going to let Jason introduce himself and go through the agenda. So with that, Jason, take it away, please.
Thank you, Doug. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe there we go. So again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Doug. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to our webinar, Piecing Together the Puzzle, Power BI Source Control. As Doug mentioned, and I'm sure most of us know, given the invitation, my name is Jason Roy. I'll be leading the presentation today. I hope you're all ready to have some fun, and more importantly, hopefully you'll learn something new along the way as well. Just to kind of give a little premise to the presentation, as we all know, environments can vary and likely will vary from one organization to the next. That being said, the main goal of this webinar today is to uncover some of the metadata under the hood of a Power BI file. We will then discuss what this metadata actually means and how it could possibly be used within the source control solution.
Lydia, you know if Sean Agbor is here, if he's going to be joining us today?
Excuse me? All right. Well, with that being said, I'll continue going actually. So what will we cover today? We'll have a few intro slides. Doug already covered some of this, but we'll go over who Covenant Technology Partners and myself are. We'll cover a few key points of emphasis over the presentation today. We'll also discuss what the Power BI enhanced metadata is and what it means, as well as some prerequisites to extract that data and use it within your source control solution. Following the intro slides, we'll then transition into a demo. The goal of this demo is we'll have a few scenarios that we'll cover in order to illustrate how you may be able to use this metadata in your own source control solution. And then we'll wrap up with some kind of finalizing remarks as well as some Q&A. So who is Covenant Technology Partners? Doug touched on a little bit. We're a Microsoft Gold partner consulting firm. We have around 40 or so employees, give or take, founded in 2004. We're located in St. Louis, Missouri, and headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. That said, we do help clients, all around the country, and I've even done some work internationally in my time on the team. So we are very flexible. We like to help wherever we can, and we are not kind of geographically based. We have a number of solution groups within Covenant, one of which is data analytics. This is actually the solution group that I work with the most, as you can imagine. We do Power BI work, Azure Data Factory work, Azure Synapse work, data integration. We do a lot of bleeding edge stuff, data, you name it. Chances are we've touched it or have some knowledge on that field. We also have a Dynamics 365 solution group. As you can imagine, the Dynamics 365 group works on D365 development, support, and more. We also have a Microsoft 365 solution group. They work on stuff such as Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Platform, and so forth. And we also have some other solution groups such as security, modern apps, etc. We have a very well-rounded team that kind of cover all the bases. So who am I? As we know, my name is Jason Roy. I was born and raised here in St. Louis, Missouri. I attended Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri, where I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Information Systems in December of 2016. I shortly thereafter joined Covenant in 2017, where I've kind of worked up my ranks to now being a senior data analytics consultant. Since joining CTP, I've worked with all kinds of industries and organizations of different sizes. In my role, I've focused a lot on Power BI development of all shapes and sizes, anywhere from Power BI jump starts to just kind of generic support of teams, to even leading dashboards in a day. It's not to say that I'm limited to just Power BI. I've done some work in Synapse. I've done some data factory work, but my area of expertise, I would say, falls into that Power BI realm. I'm also Microsoft certified as a data analyst associate. This is from the DA100 exam, and it's actually a new development as I took the exam around this time about a month ago. So that's pretty exciting. The key points. I only have 2 key points on here. I looked at this slide for a little while when I put it together, and really there's 2 really big points that I want us to kind of capture today. The Power BI enhanced metadata really is the key to this. The ability to extract and interpret the Power BI enhanced metadata is the most important thing that we'll cover. Essentially, this will, in essence, unlock the ability to view changes from one version to the next in Power BI. And as we know in Power BI, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I'm confident that we'll all have differing levels of security within organizations, different source control solutions, and most notably, my demo environment today will likely not be the same as your environment. And this is all absolutely okay. The things that we will go over today are conceptual and will be able to be lifted, shifted, and molded to fit your organization's needs. So the Power BI enhanced metadata, I keep mentioning it. What is it? When Power BI Desktop creates reports, it also creates dataset metadata and the corresponding PBIX and PBIT files. The data was previously stored in base64 encoded M and data sources. And with the release of the enhanced metadata, this limitation has been removed. So in a nutshell, it's everything about your Power BI file coming out essentially in JSON format. This includes, but it's not limited to, tables in your data set, columns, various DAX measures, the underlying Power Query, maybe some hierarchies you have defined, your data sources, row-level security, and more. This has been generally available in Power BI Desktop as of September 2020. It was in public preview as of March 2020, so it was in public preview for 4 or 5 months or so. So extracting this data for Power BI has not been available for a very long time, especially for those who aren't eager to using preview features. So it's not, kind of widely available knowledge or widely known knowledge to kind of extract this metadata. The metadata can be extracted in a few ways. We'll go over this in more detail in the demos, but you're not limited to one solution. And also, the metadata is not limited to Power BI. When we start reviewing the metadata file, some of you may recognize it as being similar to the tab with the tabular and it is actually meant to be a Finally, according to Microsoft document of the capabilities that are seen in this metadata, and kind of the sooner you can get comfortable with it and know how to use it, the better moving forward. So what are some prerequisites to actually, get this metadata and use it in your source control in Power BI? At a bare minimum, you'll need Power BI Desktop, a PBIX or PBIT file, access to a source control solution, and as any good BI developer should have, a good attitude. That all being said, really when it does come down to it, and you'll see this in the demo, you can actually extract this metadata file with nothing other than a Power BI file. So technically that's really all you need is a Power BI file and a good attitude. But it might be difficult to keep that good attitude if you can't actually test things. So I digress. A few other tools that are kind of nice to have, Tabular Editor. If you haven't seen Tabular Editor yet, this is a tool that I cannot recommend highly enough. It essentially puts an editor on top of your enhanced metadata file and allows you to make updates to your data model. And these updates can range anywhere from updating the data type of your fields, scripting, hundreds of DAX measures instantly, to applying best practice guidelines to your file in order to hide keys, apply formatting, etc. Another nice to have is Power BI Pro or Power BI Premium licensing. Technically, pulling the enhanced metadata file does not require a license of any sort, but as I'm sure we're all aware, Power BI Pro is actually needed to share the reports and data sets amongst your organization, and Power BI Premium will take it a step further to unlock some more capabilities, such as deployment pipelines, for example. Finally, the ALM toolkit is very helpful. The ALM toolkit is very useful for Power BI deployments. This allows you to essentially make comparisons from one version to the next, albeit locally. And if you have a Power BI Premium license, you can even deploy right from the tool. Don't quote me on this, but I believe you can compare locally to Power BI service if you have a Power BI Premium license. So having this tool can be useful when you want to move changes from one version of Power BI file to the next. Obviously, as we go through the source control, it'll kind of handle that on its own, but it might, help you sleep a little bit easier to make that comparison on your own. As I mentioned, the environment isn't as important as the concepts that we'll learn today, but just so we're all aware of the demo environment that I'll be using, obviously I'm using Power BI Desktop. I have a Power BI Pro license and Premium per user. In fact, I'm not doing anything with the Premium per user, but I do have it set up. I'm using a local SQL Server instance. I'm actually just using localhost on my computer, where I imported the Wide World Importers database, and we're using Azure DevOps as our source control solution. We're going to go through a few scenarios today, time permitting. We should be able to make it through all of them, but the first of which, I want to explore various ways that we can extract the enhanced metadata file from Power BI. As mentioned, there's a couple of different ways to extract this data. I want to be sure to cover both and discuss the differences between the two. We'll then explore how these files can be compared to see changes over versions. As we all know, tracking changes has long been a challenge in Power BI. So we'll look at how to use this metadata to alleviate this challenge. And finally, we'll explore how to roll changes back to previous version when necessary. As any good source control has, you will need the ability to roll back to a previous version of the file, in the case of a fire drill. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get into the demo. So the first thing I wanted to go through in this demo is just kind of go through my data model. As I mentioned, I have the Wide World Importers database in here. The data is a little outdated, but that doesn't really matter. I just have a basic Power PBIX file here, some basic visuals, a handful of tables, a couple back tables, and 3 dimension tables. And if we go take a look at this data model, we can kind of see, how these relationships kind of interact. And it's good to see this as we start looking at the enhanced metadata, because we can see how this actually, reflects in the metadata. So reviewing kind of the relationships, we see that obviously we kind of have just some generic ones, city key to city key, employee key to salesperson ID, and some date relationships. A key distinction here is we do have an inactive one. So we'll be able to see that in our enhanced metadata and how that kind of looks. Looking through our tables, city, and really all of our tables, I went through and I hid our keys. So we'll see there's no keys in employee, no keys in purchase. We do have keys though in sale. Sale's a little bit different. I've added measures here, as well as keys. This will be the table that we kind of update through our demos today. So that's the basic kind of data model that I have set up. We'll do some enhancements, some kind of basic ones, just so we can kind of see that workflow. But those of you, so now we're going to go into how you actually extract that metadata. The first method that I'm going to show is using through Tabular Editor. And this will be I'll use this method the rest of the demo. But there is multiple ways to do it, and there really is no drawback. They just kind of have different methods, if you will. But before we extract that metadata, I want to talk through this model because this is kind of the UI over your metadata file. You know, you have your data sources, various perspectives. We have our relationships. You can actually see that this relationship is inactive. We have our various security roles, which I don't have any RLS in here, so you won't see any. Shared expressions. I have a reference Power Query in the back end that kind of just touches the database once. And we have our tables, right? And in this tables, we can go through and, you know, we can change the formats of the strings and stuff like that. So if we look at sales, obviously we have all these keys hidden, or we have all these keys here. We can go through and hide things and so forth. But the main, you know, kind of purpose here is we want to take a look at the metadata. So how do you get that? When you have the tabular editor open, if you do File, Save As, it'll start out with this model.bim file. Now, this model.bim file is your model in the back end. It's a JSON file. So we'll take a look at this. I like to name it the same as my Power BI files, just so we can kind of group them together. So worldwide importers, sales and purchases, same as this data set. So now we have it saved. So when we actually go and open this up, demo, let's go ahead and open this in Notepad++. We can see we now have all of this, you know, fancy metadata that describes our data set, where in the past you couldn't actually really get this. So just kind of scrolling down the list, you know, we have our data set name, our compatibility level, you know, the model that takes everything. So all of this, all our model information is under here, which is 15,000 lines of data. But just kind of scrolling down, right? A lot of this stuff isn't super important, right? You know, data access options, legacy redirects, don't really care about that. But when it gets interesting is when we kind of look at tables, right? We have a purchase table. We can see that, you know, I have this key here. It's hidden. We can see our data types, the source columns, how it's formatted. We can even see the ones, our fields that are summarized. So we can see the purchase key is summarized by account, as well as the various annotations associated. And, you know, you can kind of just go down the list, the various columns within that table. But, you know, we've looked at purchase, just kind of taking a look at the tables. Oh, and this is another key feature here. So within the purchase table, you can actually look at that underlying Power Query. So let's say you have some real complex M code underlying your tables. You get that within the editor now. So just kind of going through some more tables. I thought these ones were interesting to go over. So those of you who don't know or haven't seen, there is a there's the setting in the Power BI file that allows you to create auto date timetables. And if you turn that on, this is what you get actually. You get a bunch of hidden date tables underlying the model for each date field in your model. So as you can imagine, if you have 100 date fields, that adds 100 date columns to your table. And this is kind of a good way to illustrate that. So, you know, maybe that's just kind of a best practice that it's usually good to avoid those. But just kind of going down to sales so we can kind of see, yeah, obviously I didn't hide the sale key, so we don't have anything hidden here. Just kind of show how the fields kind of play out. We do have all of our measures here. Another kind of key distinction on this first go at it is sales quantity I formatted. So we can see that annotation that it's a whole number with no thousand separators. Whereas the rest of these measures are just kind of just measures, right? There's nothing has been updated in them. And kind of scrolling through the rest of the table here, or the JSON here, you know, we have more tables, bunch of date tables, bunch of the same kind of stuff we just went over. We kind of go to the bottom here. Let me actually close tables. There we go. We can see our relationships. That inactive relationship is in here. But rather than dig through all of them, we'll just kind of keep going. So we know we are short on time here. We have our culture, so kind of the language that's underlying your Power BI file. There's back that expressions, that reference that I mentioned. We have our query groups, how they're ordered within. I have folders in my query editor, so I have my source, fact, and dimensions, as well as how that's ordered in the query editor. So that's the JSON file. That's your enhanced metadata file in a nutshell. And that's how you get it through the tabular editor. Now, how do you get it without the tabular editor? You know, I imagine there's some people in this call, in this webinar, that don't have the ability to get the Power BI external tools. So if you had to get it through tabular editor, then that essentially makes that, you know, ineffective. It makes it moot. But you don't need any kind of external tools to do so. So the other way to get that is, first you're going to have to go through, you change the file extension name. And for those of you who don't know, I sure didn't know it was there. You can show file name extensions by clicking the file, clicking view, and checking this file name extensions checkbox. Otherwise, you won't see any file extensions after Power BI files. So I have two here. I'm going to change the PBIT, the Power BI template file, to a zip. So what you do is you change the file type to a zip file that essentially compress or kind of extracts everything out of the file, and you'll be prompted with this. You know, if you change this, it might make it unusable. Well, we know it won't make it unusable, so we're going to change it. So we see when it zips it up, it gives us all of this different kind of metadata associated. There's a lot of kind of noise in here. You know, you get the version, you get some settings. The big one that we want is the data model schema. And this is the same thing as that BIM file. There's a few different things. You'll get like the created timestamp and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, if we go take a look at our first table, you know, purchase, and here's another one, row number. That's not huge, right? But take a look at purchase. We have a purchase key. We see it's hidden, and we have all of that same metadata associated. So, you know, there is multiple ways to get that. Another kind of cool distinction here, and I actually recently learned this, is there's this report layer. I didn't think you could get the metadata for your Power BI reports, but this layout file actually does include it. I'm not going to kind of beautify this because it's a mess, but if we take a look here, we have a title on this visual, top 10 states by quantity. And if we just real quick look up top 10, we go to the find next. Where'd it go? Yeah, and we see here, there's the title of that visual. So associated, we have all the fields on there, kind of where that visual lies in the report pane, the colors and so forth. So this could be a really cool feature if you have a real complex report, or maybe you want to keep the source control for your reports as well. You can absolutely get that from here. Now, those are the two different ways to extract the metadata. Now, I want to show how we can how that metadata updates, right, as you make changes. So this is why I left all of those keys unhidden. So we go through here and we're just going to hide these. So I've already went through, and this data set with all the unhidden keys is in my source control. So as we go and publish this up, we'll be able to see how that kind of how that evolves. And what we're also going to do, just for best practices, is we're going to change these formats. Oh, wait a second. All to be currency. Phone number. All right, let's do 1,000 separator. So those of you who have not been in Tabular Editor, you'll need to click this button here to save the change, to push the changes to Power BI Desktop. So it loads for a second. Another cool distinction is it does it almost instantly. Whereas if you go through and create a bunch of measures, I'm sure we've all experienced, it takes forever. So again, we want to make sure we keep this BIM file. I already have a repo that I've created over here in repo, my Power BI source control demo. And I've actually already created it. But we're going to add we'll make sure we name it. We're going to add the update. Replace that. Close this. Make sure we save our file in our repo, as we know it's already there, but that's with our old data. That's before we hid the columns and formatted our measures. So we'll let this load real quick. See that, when I last looked at this, all of my files were up to date. In fact, let me create a new branch. Let me open this up. So we'll create a branch to import our first change, right? So that has finished saving, I believe. So if we hit refresh here, we'll see that all of a sudden there are some changes. Source control has detected that, and now we just need to kind of push those up to GitHub. So we'll name this, changing the data types and hiding keys, right? Commit this to DevOps. Takes a second to commit this. Well, it takes a second to push it, I should say. So now we see our commits happen. We want to push this up to DevOps. Take a second. It has a few different components it needs to pull up. So compressing objects 1 of 5. All right. So now that's up there. And now the next step would be to create a pull request. And when we're in here, you can actually see how the files change. Now, you guys may be thinking, obviously we have to go through and create this BIM file. It's a little bit of a disjointed process. So I'd recommend when we're doing this, you have some sort of required reviewer that could say, hey, you forgot to include your BIM file, or this BIM file didn't change, right? So you put a required reviewer that kind of just, help you sleep at night a little bit. So here we're just changing our data types and keys. Let's create our pull request. And if we go to files, we can actually see how this varies, which is really cool, actually, right? So before I made this change, we could see, we know sales key and all the keys were not hidden. So our metadata added that. It's really cool. And then we could see that we changed the formatting on all of these fields. Say, awesome. Well, that all looks good to me. I'm going to, mark these all as reviewed, approve, and complete it. And now this will merge these changes into the master version of your data set. So from here, I've noticed this can be a tad buggy. So we want to pull, obviously we only have our initial check-in now, but we want to pull in, we want to go to master first. Go back to master. And we want to pull in, those changes that we just created. So we fetch them. And I've noticed a little bugginess. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I don't have this set up perfectly correctly. I'm not, I'm a Power BI guy, not the DevOps guru. But it seems to think whenever you change the master, you've made a change to the file. And then when you try to pull that, you'll get prompted with this error. If it loads here in a second. It says cannot pull because there's uncommitted changes. I'm not sure what causes that change, but we know that our changes are up there and we know we didn't just change something. So I actually go through and just delete them. That way it'll allow you to, oh wait. Another key distinction is you need to close your PBIX file. Otherwise it doesn't like that. So now we have our PBIX file closed. Deleted my changes. And now we can pull these changes into our master branch. Operation completed successfully. Everything is kind of synced up now. So that's kind of how you can make initial check-in, get that pulled into your main branch and so forth. So we're going to do a couple other changes real quick. We're going to add some year-over-year measures just to kind of do another deployment. And then we are going to revert a couple changes with the idea something might have, a fire drill. We broke something. So let's do branch 2. Check out. So here we're on branch 2. We're going to go back, reopen our Power BI source control file. And what we're going to do here is go add some date files, or just some previous year metrics. And it's kind of a cool caveat to the demo. I'll show you how you can script some measures in Tabulator. It is kind of a pain that you have to reopen these files, though, I will admit. So I'm actually with time in mind. I know we're going to 1:45. I'm gonna make 2 changes in here. I was planning to have 2 scenarios, 2 check-ins, but I'll add another scenario here. We're gonna update the quantity name, and I'll show you why after. It's gonna kind of illustrate, changing the column name of a organizational wide data set and seeing kind of the repercussions and how quickly you can revert those changes. So now that we have it open, we're going to reopen our tabular editor. We're going to make 2 changes once this decides to open. So here I've written a script that scripts out DAX measures. So we have this advanced scripting pane. And for every measure you have selected, is what this is saying, create a previous year measure. So we just run script. It's pretty cool. We can see all of those just got created. What we also want to do is update sales quantity to be sales quantity abbreviated. Those of us who do a lot of Power BI development know this is going to break this visual because it's changing the name. So we'll see it here. Let's push it to the data set. It's going to say, whoa, where'd sales quantity go? And you can imagine once we get this in a Power BI desktop or Power BI service, this could create a pretty big issue. But obviously you want to make sure you keep your BIM file up to date. And now we have all of our changes made. So from here, we're going to make another deployment. Let me make sure I save my file. And what's cool is Power BI automatically detects it. Obviously, it's not showing it now. I'm going to make sure this saves complete. Or the source control actually figures it out, I should say. So we just made that change. Refresh. Source control detected the change. So again, we're going to say adding year-over-year measures and renaming sales quantity. Commit all. So push this. Again, it's going to have to do some compressing of the objects and so forth. All right, now we're going to need to create a pull request to merge this data together. And again, maybe something, I want to actually create some tags, add ability to year-over-year reporting, rename this. And what we're going to illustrate is it breaks the sales quantity visuals. So we'll create this. No, it's all fine. So we're just let's take a look at the changes real quick. So we see sales quantity changed. We added all these measures. So it captures all of that. We'll complete the merge. We now know. So if we go into master, say we want to fetch the new data. So we now see that that's still there. Or to make sure that we don't lose anything, I'm going to make sure we have master, delete branch 2. Make sure we reset our changes. Oops, got to close this again. So now Power BI is closed, and close that out again. We can pull our changes in And then we'll see that that change is actually reflected. Like that. Let's make sure these changes are not there. See, it can be a little bit buggy from time to time. There may be better, GitHub might be a little bit more efficient. I had to delete that a couple times, but nonetheless, we could still see that history from one version to the next, which is very powerful. So now we have all those updated. Let's imagine that we have this Power BI app out for the rest of our users. And well, let's imagine that we have a big self-service tenant with hundreds of users, thousands of reports. All of a sudden, we broke we broke 500 reports, let's say, that had sales quantity on it. You cannot feasibly go through and update all of those visuals for each individual user. So this prompts a fire drill in my eyes. So from here, you can actually take that, say, view history, say, I don't want this one, add a year over year and renaming sales quantity. Say this just broke everything, so I'm reverting it. I'm not going to change any of that just because we'll run pretty low on time here. We'll complete this. So if we look at the changes in the files, the one that we're reverting, obviously sales quantity and all of our previous year measures, we're reverting back to sales quantity so we can fix our measures or fix our reports. So you complete your merge. So now that we want to fetch this, and this will bring back our kind of reverted data or our reverted metadata once the fetch is complete. And then from there, you do a merge and you make a publish. But due to time, obviously we could pull this and then we would, this would actually let's show it real quick because this is kind of important. If we're looking at our source control data, it hasn't been updated for a couple minutes. But if we actually pull this will update it. See, now we see 139. And just to kind of prove this out real quick before we jump back to PowerPoint and questions, we could say sales quantity, and voila, it's there. So it's a very very helpful solution once you kind of get through the ups and downs, if you will. But that's kind of all the scenarios. We extracted our metadata. We published a few changes and we even reverted some changes back due to a fire drill. So with that all said, in summary, I know all our environments will look different, but I hope you learned a few of these core concepts that allow you to implement something similar within your organization. For one, how to extract Power BI data sets, enhance metadata. We saw there's a couple ways to do this. But hopefully at the very least, you can convert a PBIX or PBIT file to a .zip file. I hope you learn how to interpret the enhanced metadata, as well as different ways to utilize the metadata in a source control solution. Throughout our demo, we saw a few different scenarios that we can come up with within a Power BI workflow and kind of illustrate the day-to-day work you might do. If you're interested in any of this, and implementing any of this or any other Power BI questions, you can follow up with us. You can follow up with Covenant. We have support kind of chat bots on our website. We also respond to LinkedIn, and you can get a hold of me via my email, jroy@mailctp.com, or LinkedIn /Jason-Roy. This does kind of fit in pretty well with our Analytics in a Day workshop. The Analytics in a Day workshop is dedicated to hands-on training to help you get started on your cloud analytics journey. The lab will focus on building an end-to-end analytics solution with Azure Synapse and Power BI. It'll help you get a better understanding of how to create an analytics pipeline that goes from data ingestion all the way to insights using Power BI, as well as empower self-service analytics and enable a truly data-driven culture in your business. With that said, I know I might have went over a little bit on the presentation, but here for Q&A now. Happy to answer any questions as necessary.
Hey, Jason, about 5 to 6 minutes in, we lost your signal there for just a few seconds. So I know it's very, very difficult because I've been trying to figure out exactly where you were, but it was before you were describing the prerequisites. Is there any way that you can go back and repeat what you said? And I invite anyone else on the call that can better direct Jason to where we lost him. Please chime in.
Was it this slide by chance? It's one of the most important ones.
I believe it was.
Yeah, because we have the prereqs next, and this was just kind of describing the Power BI enhanced metadata. And in a nutshell, I guess I'll just go over this slide again. So in the past, when Power BI created reports, the data was previously stored in a base 64 encoded M and data source. And with the release of this enhanced metadata, this limitation has been removed. And what that means is, in a nutshell, everything about your Power BI file is in JSON format, which we saw in the demo, including things like your tables, columns, DAX measures, Power Query, and so forth. And that's not to say, this has been available for a really long time. I mean, it's only been general available since September 2020, so not even a year yet. It was in public preview as of March 2020, but we all got distracted in March 2020. So, like I said, it's not been available for a really long time. There's not a ton of documentation. So don't be, don't get, be down on yourself for not hearing about this. It's not kind of a widely known feature, especially those who aren't keen to using preview features. It's been even, longer for you guys, or less time for you guys. And as we saw, the data can be extracted in a few different ways. I did see some pretty elegant solutions online where people wrote some .NET solutions and, were able to kind of go publish their data. Some really cool stuff. And another kind of key component is this is not limited to just Power BI. Some of you may have noticed as we started reviewing the metadata file that it was very similar to the tabular object model, or TOM, from Analysis Services. And the Power BI enhanced data model was actually designed with the tabular object model in mind, and is meant to be a similar format. And finally, one of my big points of this slide is that according to Microsoft documentation from April 2021, so pretty recently, quote, future Power BI functionality will be built upon its metadata, end quote. Which this leads me to believe that while we just saw all these kind of cool source control, tabular editor capabilities, I think we're really only seeing the tip of the iceberg with this metadata. I mean, I think it's really going to be a push moving forward. It's going to really unlock some very powerful capabilities for organizations. And obviously we saw source control. That's something that's been lacking historically. So it's a really cool feature. And I'm eager to see how Microsoft kind of pushes it moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. Kelly has a quick question. Do you have to be an administrator to perform changes to metadata?
No, you do not have to be an administrator. Kind of like I was saying, I mean, heck, you could go through and take a PBIX file, convert it into a zip, and you can go change the metadata from there. I guess the administration would come down to, publishing all of that would come down to, how your source control looks. But as far as getting the metadata is concerned, that's all local. You can do it all from your desktop. So there shouldn't be any kind of guardrails there, if you will.
Wonderful. Looks like Graham has a question. Do live tabular model connections, SSAS, create metadata files as well? I'm not seeing the data model schema file on my live connection report.
So you're using a live connection. That is actually something I haven't tested. I would imagine, I know you cannot open Tabular Editor using a live connection report. Now, something that I would be curious about is if you can create it to a .zip and if you get anything out of there. But from a Power BI perspective, you cannot get the Tabular Editor and the .bim file from a live connection. So I'd imagine Analysis Services operates very similarly.
And Graham and Kelly, if you care to ask follow-up questions, by all means, feel free to come off mute and you can ask your questions. And likewise, anyone that has questions, feel free to come off mute and ask your questions. That's all the questions from the chat. Are there any other questions? All right, Michelle, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we're good. Just thank you everybody for attending, and I will send a follow-up email with our next step offers and the recording later this afternoon. And thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that. Thank you all for coming. I hope you all learned something. I know I did. Doing a little bit of research for this. If you have any questions, just to clarify things, you need some help implementing this, or just want to talk, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help.
Thank you, Jason.